live from Westminster at midnight.
Car ahead.
The terror at the gates of Parliament. 5 people are dead, including a police officer, after a knife-wielding attacker's deadly assault.
I'm doing it now.
The Prime Minister is rushed away from Westminster and condemns what she calls a depraved attack.
We will all move forward together, never giving in to terror, and never allowing the voices of hate and evil to drive us apart.
The officer killed in the attack named as 48-year-old PC Keith Palmer, a husband and a father. The MP is forced to flee as many are locked down for hours inside Parliament. And the ordinary people mowed down on a busy London bridge as paramedics warn of catastrophic injuries. Good morning. The Prime Minister has vowed that Britain will defeat the forces of evil. That's after an attempted attack on Westminster, which left 5 people dead. That includes a police officer named in the last few hours as 48-year-old Keith Palmer, and the attacker who, after driving his car into pedestrians, was shot dead inside the grounds of Parliament. Well, the first indication of an attack was on Westminster Bridge, where witnesses reported an out-of-control vehicle. A car was driving into pedestrians as it travelled along the bridge towards Parliament Square, and we know that at least 10 people were injured there. The car then crashed into the railings just before Parliament Square, injuring even more people on that pavement. An attacker ran through the gates into New Palace Yard and confronted police officers there. Witnesses say that they saw a man with a large knife attacking a police officer. Armed officers opened fire and the attacker was shot at the scene. Well, Sky's Robert Nisbet was one of the very first journalists on the scene, and a warning that his report starts with footage showing victims in the moments after the attack.
There has been a terror attack.
In the aftermath, the stunned calm on Westminster Bridge. A passerby capturing the moments after the murderous car journey before emergency services arrived. Pedestrians and cyclists targeted by the killer, treated and comforted on the ground. Eyewitnesses to the carnage console each other. Some break the news on their phones, others clearly distraught. Little surprise after witnessing scenes like this. One victim lying under the wheels of a bus. A dreadful attack just metres from the heart of Britain's democracy, prompting defiance from the Prime Minister.
The values our Parliament represents: democracy, freedom, human rights, the rule of law, command the admiration and respect of free people everywhere. That is why it is a target for those who reject those values. But let me make it clear today, as I have had cause to do before, any attempt to defeat those values through violence and terror is doomed to failure.
This is how it began. Confusion and panic as gunshots rang in Parliament Square.
You can see that we're being pushed back by police at the moment. We came down here about 4 or 5 minutes ago and there was a wave of people running down the street, including workmen and others who work around Parliament, who just say they didn't know what was going on, but they heard a noise and they were told just to get out as quickly as possible.
And this is where the car ended its bloody mission, smashed into the railings.
Oh my God!
The attacker on foot then forced his way into New Palace Yard, where he stabbed a police officer in front of horrified onlookers.
Just outside Westminster Underground station, when I heard an almighty crash and a vehicle, looked like a 4x4, I could see on the opposite side of the road, had crashed into the railings. There was smoke coming from underneath the bonnet of this vehicle. I walked on a few paces further and saw what I assumed to be either a pedestrian or a cyclist who'd clearly been hit and wasn't moving, although he did then gently move for a couple of seconds. The guy who I assume was the driver of this 4x4 got out of the car and suddenly sprinted away from the scene, and that was followed by 4 what sounded very much like gunshots to me.
The attacker was shot by colleagues of the injured officer. The suspect then taken away on a stretcher, stripped, his wounds covered. The red circles mark 2 knives lying on the cobbles. On a busy day in Parliament, the Prime Minister and hundreds of MPs and staff were inside the palace.
Back. Is he coming? Back down, back down, back. No, get back. 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 Somebody's under fire.
Counter-terrorism specialist firearm officers, the elite response team, raced inside. The Prime Minister extracted and removed at speed. In her wake, thousands of confused tourists, workers and commuters caught up in a few frantic moments at one of the world's most famous landmarks.
I was just walking across the bridge when suddenly a bus stopped right in front of me and everybody started screaming. And I saw a trainer in the road, and first of all...
A trainer as in a shoe?
A shoe, yeah. And I thought somebody must have been hit by a car. And then I saw a body on the other side of the road, and then there was another body further up. And then when I looked over the side of the bridge, there was another body lying in the water.
Parliament Square became a helipad, bringing armed officers in as ground ambulances took the injured to nearby St Thomas's Hospital. Inside Parliament, 2 hours after Prime Minister's questions, a clerk ran into the chamber with the news.
I am now going to suspend the sitting of the House. This House is now suspended, but please wait here.
MPs and parliamentary staff gathered in Central Lobby, where an armed officer struck an incongruous figure. They filled ancient Westminster Hall, checking their phones for information as the lockdown continued. One MP was caught in the crush outside on the palace perimeter.
We had no choice but to leave the building, and we have rotary doors, one in, one out at a time, so people were getting stuck in the doors. There was a real sense of panic at that point as we all tried to get out of the doors. And I shouted to the security guard to open the doors so we could all just leave as quickly as possible. He was a bit reluctant to do that because I think they'd already been told that they were on lockdown and to keep things shut. But obviously we wanted to get out of that situation where there was shooting behind us as quickly as possible.
Across the river, the London Eye stopped turning. Tourists trapped in the glass pods as the discordant chorus of sirens continued on the ground. New Scotland Yard is a few hundred metres from the scene. Officers brought the grim updates.
One of those who died today was a police officer, PC Keith Palmer, a member of our Parliamentary and Diplomatic Protection Command. Keith, aged 48, had 15 years service and was a husband and a father. He was someone who left for work today expecting to return home at the end of his shift, and he had every right to expect that would happen. I can also now confirm that there are 3 members of the public who've lost their lives in the attack. Specially trained family liaison officers have been deployed to support them. And, as I confirmed earlier, the suspected attacker was shot dead by an armed officer, therefore meaning that now in total we have 5 people who've died today.
Armed with a car and knives, in a few minutes, one man ended lives and wrought horrific injuries. The day the capital's emergency services feared finally arrived. Robert Nisbet, Sky News, Westminster.
Well, let's tell you more about the police officer who was among the victims, because he's been named tonight as PC Keith Palmer. The 48-year-old husband and father was stabbed in the grounds of the Houses of Parliament, and the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, has paid tribute to the officer, saying that he was killed while bravely doing his duty and that he was courageous. This was an attack which took place in one of the busiest spots in Britain, an area where tourists mingle with politicians and obviously as well the ordinary London public. Sky's David Bowden has more on some of the many eyewitnesses to this attack.
Politician turned paramedic. This is Conservative MP and former Army captain Tobias Ellwood, whose brother was killed in the Bali bomb 15 years ago, trying to save the life of a Westminster policeman. Just one of those caught up in the terror attack on Parliament. MPs, journalists, tourists, students and even children on school trips were among those who witnessed the carnage in the capital.
We met a group of kids that were near us. They were just by the police station. There's the headquarters of the police is here nearby. So they were crying. They were on a school tour, I guess, and they were all crying, desperate, calling their families. And one of them said, "Oh, I was there," and I was like, "Run for your life." I don't know what happened. It was just chaos when we heard the shots. There was a man with a knife.
Inside the Palace of Westminster, political correspondents saw it all unfold before them.
I saw a large crowd fleeing the attacker, who appears to be carrying a knife, fleeing him from close to the tube station. He then entered the gates of Parliament, charged at officers, and he was then very swiftly shot by armed police.
But the terror began on the other side of the river, where the attacker's car mounted the pavement packed with pedestrians.
Just on top of the London tour bus, when we were coming over the bridge, and we heard what we thought was gunshot wound. Not 100% sure, are you? And then we just saw the car. It just went off key and just ploughed into people, and there was one person under the wheel. And then, as you looked further along the bridge, there was people just lying down on the floor, and they were shot. I would say I probably saw about maybe 10 bodies on there.
The killing spree lasted a matter of seconds, but for a long time afterwards, ambulance crews tended the wounded where they lay.
I walked up onto the bridge and there was, 3 or 4 bodies that I saw. People had been seriously injured. And I didn't see the actual incident, but there were car parts that had broken off on the floor.
This was an assault at the very heart of London. No one who was there or nearby will ever forget what they saw. David Bowden, Sky.
The suspected terror attack outside the Houses of Parliament was a major test of the security operation at Westminster. Shortly after the incident, the Prime Minister was seen being bundled into a car which then sped away from Parliament. Downing Street and the Palace of Westminster were then locked down for 5 hours, keeping all the MPs inside as a major security operation was put into place. Sky's Lisa Holland reports.
Having left a trail of destruction behind him on Westminster Bridge, the attacker managed to penetrate one of Britain's securest buildings, if only by around 20 metres. This footage shows where he was treated on the cobbles in New Palace Yard, in the grounds of the Houses of Parliament, having apparently got in through the front gates before being shot.
This incident shows the success, really, of the security arrangements at Parliament. He got past the actual boundary wall, but only by a matter of a few metres and under challenge.
Just last Sunday, London's police were seen testing how they would respond to a major terror incident in a training exercise which saw them reacting to the mock hijacking of a pleasure boat on the Thames. 3 days later, specialist units swung into action for real, with Parliament sealed off and MPs told not to leave as the incident unfolded.
The advice from the police and the Director of Security is still that the chamber should remain in lockdown. I think, as most colleagues will realise, a number of Right Honourable and Honourable members are also in other parts of the estate or off the estate and, for obvious reasons, are unable to be present for business.
Counter-terrorism specialist firearms officers were seen swarming into Parliament. The elite firearms unit is called in for the most serious incidents. They swept the complex in case of secondary attackers. By now, the Prime Minister had already been swept away from the Palace of Westminster.
I've never seen the Prime Minister moved away by the biggest plainclothes security policeman I've ever seen. put his arm around her and took her very, very quickly away. And we could see that she was taken to her car. Automatic weapons were produced by the security detail, and she was very, very rapidly moved to safety.
The Berlin Christmas market attack, which saw 9 killed, brought calls for the increased use of security bollards, something heeded in parts of the UK, though bigger security cordons outside significant UK landmarks are now likely to be considered. Lisa Holland, Sky News.
Well, Parliament was in lockdown for several hours after the incident. I'm joined now by our chief political correspondent, John Craig. And John, Parliament will be sitting tomorrow as usual. Do you think we should see this as a message, really, from MPs that terrorists won't win, that democracy won't be defeated?
Well, Theresa May in her statement last night saw it very much as a message. She was saying that tomorrow morning Parliament will meet as normal. We will come together as normal. She also talked about Londoners getting trains and leaving hotels as normal and going on and living their lives. Her message, both on the street, on the steps of 10 Downing Street, and later today when she makes a statement to MPs in the Commons, is going to be and was the terrorist attacks are doomed to failure. We will never give in to terror. Likely to be a very sombre mood in the chamber. She was sombre when she spoke in Downing Street, dressed in black. I imagine the mood in the chamber when she speaks will be perhaps a bit similar to when after Joe Cox was murdered in June last year, and going back years when there was a real mood of defiance after the Brighton bomb in 1984. So on occasions like this, you see MPs of different political parties come together, unite against the terrorists. And as for the policeman that was killed, Keith Palmer, he was quite well known to a lot of members of Parliament. One MP, Conservative James Cleverly, has said that he's known him for 25 years. They served together in the Royal Artillery. And so sadness but defiance as well we're likely to see in the Commons chamber.
John Craig, thank you. Lots more on this developing story coming up in just a few moments' time.